All right, welcome back to Blackacre Ranch, guys. Today we're going to go over this Riomax study, right? We've done Riomax as a supplement feed for our buffalo for a year now. We've got some results. We've weaned the calves, well, weaned them, we've weighed them and everything. And this is how much Riomax we have left. Absolutely zero. We have gone through everything. And like any supplement, answer the primary questions. Does it work? Is it worth it? And kind of relay to you our experience. So that's what we're gonna get into today. And I'll try not to bore you. I don't have a lot of technical data with it because I'm just trying to convey it. So hopefully you get something out of it and you guys can make a decision about whether or not Riomax is right for you. All right, guys. So what is Riomax? Riomax is a supplement you give to your animals like cattle, I think sheep and goats, in our case buffalo, and it's a supplement you provide to them to help them increase their digestive health, right? So it's, you pay for the supplement, you give it to them, and it helps their gut go all happy. It's a gut digestive help aid kind of a thing. So it helps them do more with the stuff you're already been giving them, right? So if you've been giving them certain feeds, they will perform better on those same feeds without having to increase the feeds. That's kind of the objective of it. All right, so, holy shit. All right, I gotta park the mower. So anyway, so that's what it is. The website is riomax.net. You can go over there. You can check them out. They list that there are 4 primary factors that it aids in. A decrease in feed, so an increase rate of savings for feed, whatever you want to call it. Conception rate increase. So I think it's 3 to 10% increase in your conception rate. And then there's a 10 to 40 pound increase in your weaning weights. And then the 4th thing is improved overall health. So those are 4 ideal things that I'm sure a lot of people would want. So ultimately, I think what I should start with is why we even started using it to begin with. And we started using it because our herd wasn't doing too well. A summer and 2 ago, we had 2 summers with the herd, and on our property, you know, we're trying things out. We're building a bison ranch from scratch, and the cows just were not lactating well enough, and the weights of the calves were just so light. And it was like frustrating. You give them more and more food, like cubes and stuff like that, and you're just like, I don't know what's going on. They're just not putting out stuff for the calves. And so it was a real frustration. So last year, September timeframe, end of August, I was like, dude, I'm done with this. And I started researching Riomax.net, came up as just like, what kind of supplement do you give to increase the health of your animal? And theirs was one that popped up. So I started reading into them, looking at it, and it looked really, really good. They had a guarantee on it that said, you know what? Guaranteed to blah, 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 blah. If you give it 3 months, I think it was 3-month trial, is guaranteed to show an effect in all their claims and everything else like that. So I'm like, hey, good. Well, why don't we go ahead and do that? And so we got some Riomax. So in October of last year, we started this. We got our shipment. We got all the product and everything. And gosh dang it. It was time to start trying it all. And so that's exactly what we did. We started trying it. We put Riomax out there, and now it's time to tell you how did they do. What we had originally purchased was enough for a 1.5 years worth of Riomax. So what they have is they have a claim that the animals will consume 1/4 pound a day. And when talking to them, they had even said that buffalo will consume less, maybe 1/16 of a pound or 1/8 of a pound a day. And so whenever you've got this in, you know, supplements that you're gonna be buying, you gotta look at the consumption rate and how fast do the animals eat it. And so my consumption rate would be less than the guaranteed claim they said of 1/4 pound a day. And at that, they said that the cost of Riomax would be 43 cents a day. Now I've seen some variation on that, 45 cents, 42 cents. Let's call it mid-low 40s cents a day. So last October, we got our shipment and we started putting it out. They can come in different sizes of containers. So you'll have like a 250-pound tub, you'll have like a 125-pound tub, or you can even get 60-pound blocks, and that's what we got because they had the biodegradable container on them, and they're a lot easier to lift and to maneuver than it was these 250-pound wonders, man. I'm not getting a tractor in there and doing that. I'm just not gonna do it. So on top of that, it was a lot easier to maneuver, right? But I like the biodegradable feature. They do now have the biodegradable feature in the 125 pounders. But anyway, we got all that. We put it out there. We put 2 blocks at a time, and they started going through it. Oh, hey, Lizzie. Little puppies. Little puppies. Little puppies. You did that, little ears.
I've efficiently distracted you guys. Come on, Darcy. Come on, let's go see the piggies.
All right, let's get back to getting this thing off and telling you a story. Sorry, guys, just dismantling this because we got to get hay to the buffalo. So, all right, they mention, like I said, 4 things that they benefit you when they start using it. So, hay savings, conception rate, weaning weights, and then overall health. So, I'm going to address this. Now that we've gone through a whole year, we can kind of address how we did with all of that. So I'm going to start with overall health. When we started in October last year, we put, 2 of those buckets out at a time, and they were going through it, they were consuming it, and they started looking pretty good within 3 weeks. People started even commenting on the video, family started commenting, other people commented, hey, your animals look like they're looking better, and it was a visible thing. So, did it work? I would say visually, you could kind of start seeing like, hey, they just seem to all of a sudden have an uptick of something, whatever that was. So, I think it worked. When we get to hay savings, what we had to look at there was, we were at the, holy bejeebers, Batman, let me get this thing unpressurized. But when we looked at that, we were in the middle of a drought, and we kind of had to start saying to ourselves, all of our animals were on feed at that time, hay feed, right? So there was no grasses out there at all. We're feeding hay. So we could track how much from the weight of the hay, how much we were feeding them. And so when we're doing this is the key, guys. You have to be able to see if it works. You have to know how much feed they're going through, stuff of this nature, okay? We noticed that the feed bill, the hay consumption rate dropped, and we saw about 25% savings. So hay feed dropped, their health looked better. Both of them seem like they work, right? Conception rate, I can't really say whether conception rate worked or not. And the reason for that is buffalo breed July, August, September. They were already done with their breeding by that point. And so there was really nothing that we could, I can't say that Riomax all of a sudden got them to breed when they would have already been bred before that. And when you look at the time that all the calves pretty much were born, they bred by at least the middle of September, so it would not have affected that. So I can't comment on the conception rate increase. Weaning weight, we just did weaning weights. And the system, I would say we did have a lot higher weaning weight. If you saw our last video a couple videos ago, we had like a 65 to 70 pound increase in weaning weights. I just don't know that I can contribute all that to Riomax, and I'll tell you why in a little bit when I go, did it work for us, right? But we had changed some of their feed plan, the type of stuff we're feeding, the rates and so forth like that. So can I say it was all Riomax or not, or how much was attributable? I don't know. I would assume that if the feed savings was there and they were looking better, you might have had a better weaning weights. You might have had better conception rate. I mean, you can kind of say, well, maybe all of it's then working. So I would say if the question is, does it work? I would say, yeah, it does. worth it, right? We kind of seen that it did work for us, right? We had hay savings of 25%, we had better looking animals, and I could only presume that the other two things were working good, right? So the question is it worth it? And so this is where, as they say on their website, 8 out of 10 people agree Riomax is worth it, I guess, or works for them. And it really just depends on your kind of situation in your ranch. So I've actually turned the tractor down on the RPM level, so hopefully you guys can hear this, but really what happens is you're spending money to try and save money, all right? So because that's happening, you have to make sure that the savings you're seeing, your dollars you're putting out, is less or is greater than the money you're spending on the Riomax supplement. So take their average consumption, they say, or their daily consumption of 43 cents a day per head. You've got to look at how much money you spend per head on feed, and then assume, okay, well, what would the difference be, right? Am I saving more than I would be spending? And that is the catch. That's where I'm sure 2 of the 10 probably said no. It just doesn't make sense. So this is kind of how you have to look at it. So first thing I would say is look at your system. If you have a management plan where you are predominantly on pasture the entire time and they're eating grasses all the time and you're not really doing a lot of supplement, apart from maybe the conception rate or the weaning rates and the herd health, you're not going to see a lot of savings. The bulk of your money you will save is from the actual feed. So if you're predominantly on a pasture the entire time without not a lot of input, you're probably not going to actually save as much as you spend in Riomax. So at that point, you got to say to yourself, is the health of the animal and conception rate and weaning weights worth it to you for the extra cost of the monetary balance, right? That's your call. You got to decide. Hey, Ahmed, how you doing, big boy? I personally was already putting out a lot of money, and I don't know. You know, I mean, you got to look at that and kind of make a decision for yourself if that's worth it. I like to look at it and kind of say, you know what? If I'm spending more, it better be an obvious difference, you know, and I don't know personally on my side if I saw enough difference to justify 43 cents per head per day. So that was just me, but you could make the call. In my situation, or in a situation where you have a bunch of animals and they're in a feedlot scenario, or you're providing most of their feed, we buy 200 bales of hay a year. That's what we've been doing. If that's what you guys are doing, you're gonna see that you're spending a lot on feed, therefore a 25% savings will also cover the cost, perhaps, of the supplement on top of giving you all the benefits. I better get down here before these bulls kill my wife. So if you want to swallow the 43 cents because the herd health is good enough for you, go for it. Hey guys, if you're doing more of a feedlot style where you put out a bunch of round bales like we are, perhaps it's worth it financially on top of the health side. So anyway, you make the call there. Guys, you guys are killing us here. Come on. All right. I don't know if they're gonna let us. Ahmed, you know I don't like dancing around you too close, dude. All right, Charlotte's pulling it from the other end. All right, this will keep him busy as we go to round 2. Literally, hay bale round number 2. So as I was saying, we had 25% savings. And so really what happens is you got to watch out, at least in our case, we didn't necessarily save 43 cents a day. In other words, the savings amount was not covering 43 cents a day. You got to look at things like the amount of feed, the cost of the feed. So as hay prices went up last year, it made it easier to save 43 cents a day. But when hay prices were back to a regular amount, we actually were not saving 43 cents a day. And so even though you might be saying, hey, I'm feeding the animals and I'm doing hay all the time and it's 100%, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually going to be saving 43 cents of hay, or 43 cents per day. So what you need to do is you need to tally up the cost of your feed on a per day basis, per head, and then figure out how much of what you're giving them is saved. It's very simple math, guys, very simple, but a lot of people don't necessarily have it, okay? So you just gotta tally it up. You will see in your data that there are certain trends, certain, like, hey, I gotta have hay below a certain amount at this time, otherwise I'm not gonna see it, right? So just keep that in mind as you're doing it. You are not guaranteed 43 cents savings just because you have 25% savings in hay. One thing to keep in mind is, you know, this Riomax does have a mineral packet with it. So you wouldn't have to be using your loose minerals on top of that. So that is one little bit more extra savings you can get. However, I'm not spending that much money on savings, you know, or money for minerals. So it's not like it's going to give you an extra 10 cents per head per day. I mean, geez, you're going to be shooting steroids in your animals all day if that was going to be the case. But anyway, so those are the things to keep on watch for on savings. We didn't always, even though feeding hay, always see 43 cents per day savings per animal. So I'm sorry about having to do this while we're doing tractor time, guys, but the sun is going down and we have one last bale to give, and I got to get it before the sun goes down so you can actually see me still too. So anyway, back on this, we were giving 2 60-pound blocks a week. That means they were consuming so much. Our animals were actually consuming upwards of 75 or 0.75 pound a day per animal, when they're only supposed to be doing 1/4 pound. Or, as they had said they've seen before in buffalo, 1/8 of a pound or 1/16 of a pound. And I'm like, dude, what's up? I call them and I talk to them like 4 or 5 times throughout the year. By the time February hit, after 4 months of doing this, I was kind of like, dude, I can't keep doing this. We bought 1.5 years worth of feed, like Riomax, and we were going to go through it within 6 months, if that, okay? So I had to cut back. I talked to the guy about like what's going on. He said cut back to 1 at a time. I did that, and then I was like, I'm still going to go broke. And so what I had to do was eventually start rationing it to force a consumption rate of a quarter pound a day. Well, that's when they would go through 1 60-pound brick in 3 days instead of the 10 days. Well, obviously that led to some concerns about whether or not they're actually getting the same benefit out of the Riomax when I have to give them 3 days on, 7 days off. We did some poo looking at, and we did a video on that. We even talked about issues of when you have overconsumption of Riomax, what you can do. Despite talking to the salespeople like 4 or 5 times throughout the year, they never even brought up anything from their website, which was ways to address overconsumption. I found that on my own through different research, and it gave us marginal improvement, but it just wasn't working, right? We're still just having to force it. And so this summer when we were on hay 100%, again, like we were last fall when we started, I was able to see, well, what's their consumption rate versus last fall? And on a per head per day basis, this summer, same conditions, there was no more 25% savings, right? We were eating as much per animal as we were last fall prior to Riomax. So in that situation, when you're looking at the animals and you're saying, all right, if I have to force, you know, a 25-pound or 1/4 pound a day consumption, it wasn't cutting it, right? It just wasn't doing it. It's like you're giving it to them, but it's not seeing the real benefit because it's not provided on a daily basis. So with us vacillating between a 3/4 pound, 3 times the amount that we're consuming, we were not seeing financial savings. We were going in the whole hardcore. By the time the summer came and we force fed or force rationed a 1/4 pound to make sure that they're sticking within that, we then didn't see the savings that we were talking about, okay? So financially, we did not see the benefits. I will tell you though, if you have a small herd of under 50, you gotta watch out. Their consumption rate will most likely be higher. You're gonna have to fight that a little bit more. If you have a herds larger than that, it won't be as bad, but small herds will typically consume more and it'll be hurting your bottom line more and more. So my advice for you is look at your savings per day, your consumption or the cost per day to feed, and you gotta watch that closely. Unless you're of the type that just says, The health is good enough for me, and I see a little bit of savings, and that's good enough. If you want to foot some of the extra financial bill, that's fine. For me, it didn't work, okay? I don't think it was worth it, okay? I didn't see the savings. Yes, the health was great, but my conception rates were already, even from the herd I got originally from 2 different sources, we were upwards of 90% conception rate. And this year, when we looked at who should have had a baby or a calf that didn't, we were already like 94% conception rate. I mean, you're not going to get much better than that. We already had amazing conception rates. That's not a bonus to me. Weaning weight, like I said, this last year we started using a more energy-based supplement feed as opposed to a protein-based, and we were giving that at a pretty high content and everything else like that. And it was during the summer when we didn't see any savings from the Riomax, and all the calves looked amazing. So during the time that we rationed the Riomax and had 0 savings, we were using this other stuff, and that's when we had upwards of 75 pounds per calf difference. So I more attribute that to the feed, not the Riomax, because hey, if it's not giving me savings, then it must not be working in the other areas as well either. Pooh also said the same thing. So I don't know, man. I will just kind of leave it like this. The sun's going down. There was the guarantee that I told you about at the beginning. I talked to the guy multiple times throughout the year, and I said, hey, this is what our problems are. This is what we're having issues with. We tried his remedies. It didn't work. I did my own research, tried those, and saw marginal improvements, right? I've been in communication with the whole time. When I was shopping for this, they said, hey, hay savings, good enough for cattle, good enough for buffalo. Fertility rate, conception rates, good enough for cattle, good enough for buffalo. When it came time for weaning weights, good enough for cattle, good enough for buffalo. All this across the board, good enough for cattle, good enough for buffalo on the health, right? Guarantee everything is there on the website. I go ahead and do this, been in communication the whole time, and what do I hear? Well, it's for cattle, not for buffalo. Like, that kind of like upsets me, right? That's kind of like, a slap in the face a little bit, so it's kind of annoying. Apparently, it's not for buffalo, guys. So do what you want with that. I kind of think that that's a little cheap. Especially when I've been in communication with them. So that's my take on Riomax. Unless you like sucking up 43 cents a day per buffalo, per animal, maybe the health's good enough for you. Maybe you have really bad conception rates. I don't know. You got to weigh that. But for me, it just doesn't work. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. It's getting dark. I'm trying to get this thing done. Appreciate you joining along. Stick with us as we build this bison ranch from scratch. Thanks for joining along with me as I and my wife mainly do all the hay. And we will catch you next time. Bye.